The mashed potatoes stopped steaming before anyone noticed I wasn't breathing. I didn't blink. I didn't chew. I just stared across the table at the woman rearranging her napkin like she hadn't just detonated a grenade into the middle of a quiet Thursday night dinner. Her voice was still echoing. It hadn't been loud. Not dramatic. Just final. "So yeah," she'd said, tilting her wine glass like she was narrating someone else's life. "I guess you could say I've already moved on emotionally." That was it. No warning. No build-up. No preamble. Her mother gasped quietly. Her father looked down at his plate. Her sister muttered something and excused herself, wiping her mouth with a napkin as she went. I still hadn't moved. Not even a twitch. The food on my plate blurred at the edges, like my vision was trying to protect me. Or maybe my brain just refused to register anything other than that sentence. I've already moved on emotionally. A dinner with her family. A family that had once toasted to our engagement, cheered for our wedding, called me one of them. Now they couldn't look at me. Even the dog wouldn't come near. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather, or the seasoning in the gravy, like it was a minor footnote in a long, boring conversation. "Oh, and by the way, I don't love you anymore." And the worst part? She smiled when she said it. A smile that wasn't cruel. Wasn't apologetic either. It was the kind of smile you give when you've rehearsed something 100 times in front of a mirror and finally get to say it out loud. I looked at her hand. No ring. She hadn't worn it for weeks. She said it made her skin itch. No one asked why. No one challenged her. And I realized, as her father cleared his throat and changed the subject to gas prices, that this wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. They knew. They all knew. I was the only guest at the table. The only fool who thought we were still something. So I stood. I didn't push my chair in. I didn't even look at her. I just left the room, grabbed my coat off the rack, and walked out the front door. I heard the silverware clink behind me. I heard her mother whisper, "Well, that could have gone better." I didn't hear her follow me. I didn't expect her to, because she never would. And just like that, after 8 years, hundreds of shared meals, and more nights spent fixing things than loving each other, that's how she ended us. With a single sentence over gravy. The air outside hit me like a slap. Cold, sharp, almost deliberate. I didn't grab the keys. I didn't even know where my phone was. My hands were empty. My pockets too. But my chest felt heavier than it ever had in my life. Not the kind of weight that sits on you. The kind that grows inside you, expanding by the second. As if your ribcage is trying to hold back something that already broke loose. I didn't walk toward the car. I didn't even know where I was going. My legs just moved. I stepped off their porch, the one I had helped stain 3 summers ago, and onto the gravel like I wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. No one ran after me. No door opened. Not even a shout. Just silence. Perfectly timed, perfectly cruel silence. Like they had all agreed in advance. Let him go. He'll get over it. But I wasn't going to get over it. Not this time. I kept walking until the porch light faded behind me. My shoes crunched over the dirt road as I passed parked cars and sleeping trees. The night had that eerie kind of stillness. The kind where you hear your own breath too loud. Where every thought repeats like a broken record. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I wanted to turn around and demand an explanation, but I didn't do that either. I just kept going, one foot after the other, as the woman I'd shared a life with laughed over red wine inside a house full of people who no longer saw me as part of that picture. And then it hit me. She had practiced that line. It wasn't something said in the heat of the moment. There was no fight. No tears. She had waited until the plates were full and everyone had just begun to eat. Then dropped that phrase like a napkin on the table. I've already moved on emotionally. Polished. Clean. Almost poetic. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses. And most of all, she wanted to break me without raising her voice. Why? That question was boiling under everything else. Why now? Why like this? Why in front of people? If she truly didn't care, why not just say it in private and spare the spectacle? Unless that was the point. Unless hurting me publicly made her feel justified. I turned left at the main road and walked until I found a bus stop bench. I sat down finally. The numbness began creeping in. The kind that doesn't make you feel better, just slows down the pain long enough to think. I replayed the last 3 weeks. The signs were there. Missed calls. Her going quiet when I walked into the room. Smiles she'd give her phone that I hadn't seen in months. And now I knew she hadn't been emotionally checked out. She had emotionally relocated. I heard a text notification buzz from somewhere. My phone. I'd left it in my jacket, which was still hanging on the hook by their front door. Her father's door. The door I used to knock on with a bottle of wine and a stupid smile, trying to win approval. Now I couldn't even knock without knowing I was no longer welcome. A car drove by and slowed, headlights sweeping over me. For half a second, I thought it was her. Maybe she'd come to find me, to explain, to undo what she'd just done. But the car passed. Just a stranger. Like I was to them now. That was the moment I realized something else. I wasn't sad. I wasn't heartbroken. I was done. Because sadness would mean I still had hope. Heartbreak would mean I still wanted to repair something. But I didn't. Not anymore. She made her decision with a smile. Her family watched like it was a play they'd already seen. And I had sat there like the fool in the final scene, unaware the curtain had already closed behind me. I leaned back on the bench, looked up at the stars, and breathed in the cold. She thought I would go quietly. She thought wrong. I couldn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat on that bus stop bench until my fingers went numb and my legs started to cramp. Eventually, I wandered into the only 24-hour diner still open in that part of town, a dusty place with a jukebox that hadn't worked in years and a waitress who called everyone sweetheart, whether you looked like a serial killer or Santa Claus. She poured me a cup of coffee without asking and didn't blink when I said I didn't have my wallet. Just nodded toward the back booth and said, "Bad night." I gave her a weak smile. Something like that. She walked away without pressing, which I appreciated more than she'll ever know. I sat there until the sun came up. The strange part was, even as daylight bled through the smeared windows and trucks started humming outside, I wasn't panicking. I wasn't even grieving yet. It was more like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Like I'd already been replaced in my own story, and I was just waiting to see who got the role next. By 8 a.m., I was back outside, and the cold had softened. I walked toward the house, not because I wanted to see her, but because my jacket was still hanging on their stupid antique coat rack. Inside the pocket, my phone, my ID, and the last bit of dignity I'd left behind when I walked out the night before. The driveway was empty. Good. I moved fast, knocked once, sharp, not polite, and waited. Her father opened the door wearing that same quiet, cowardly look he wore last night. He didn't say a word, just stepped aside. The jacket was right where I left it. I grabbed it, slipped my phone out and checked it. 8 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 1 message from her. It read, "Please don't be dramatic. We'll talk later." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Not even an ounce of regret. Like I had embarrassed her by reacting. Like my pain was inconvenient to her narrative. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and turned to leave, but her father stopped me with a voice so quiet it almost didn't register. "Gavin." I didn't know she'd do it like that. I looked him dead in the eye. "But you knew she was going to do it." He didn't answer. Didn't have to. That silence said everything. Back outside, I stood at the edge of the porch and realized something else. The man who used to belong in that house no longer existed. The one who laughed too loud at her mom's dumb jokes. The one who helped fix the deck when her brother disappeared mid-project. The one who once held her hand under that kitchen table and thought he'd found a forever kind of love. That man had died last night, and no one in that house even noticed the funeral. I drove home in silence. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of wind and tires and the occasional buzz of a phone I no longer wanted to answer. When I opened the door to our apartment, everything was exactly where we'd left it. Her mug on the counter. A pair of her shoes by the couch. A half-burned candle with the scent she always said reminded her of her childhood lake house. I walked into the bedroom and stared at the bed we used to share. Her pillow still had the faint imprint of her head. And suddenly I felt something new. Not grief. Not fury. Just clarity. She didn't want me anymore. That was her choice. But the way she did it? The place, the timing, the audience. That wasn't just heartless. It was planned. Premeditated. Weaponized. She wanted a scene she could control. She wanted to be seen as bold and empowered while painting me as the fragile one who couldn't handle growth. So fine. Let her grow. Let her bloom, explode, fly, vanish, whatever she was chasing. I wasn't going to chase her. But I also wasn't going to let her rewrite the ending of my story. Because while she was busy, emotionally moving on, I just started waking up. And I hadn't even started speaking yet. She waited 3 days to show up at our apartment. 3 full days of silence, not a single knock, not even a question like, "Are you okay?" I guess that was the final proof that she hadn't just checked out emotionally. She had packed her bags mentally, walked out of our life, and assumed I'd quietly fall in line. Maybe she thought I'd move out first. Or maybe she expected to return and find me broken, curled up on the floor, surrounded by takeout boxes and begging for closure. Instead, she came home to a locked door and a missing nameplate. I'd taken my name off the lease. Digitally. Quietly. Efficiently. Just like she'd ended things. I heard the knock while I was halfway through deleting our shared streaming accounts. I ignored it. She knocked again, harder. Then she rang the bell twice like it might change my decision. Eventually, I opened the door. Not to talk. Just to see what expression she'd wear. She looked surprised. That was new. She wasn't wearing her performance face, no faux compassion, no patronizing half-smile. She was dressed down, no makeup, hoodie and messy bun like she was trying to play the part of the concerned ex-wife. It was too late for that. Can we talk? She asked. No, I said. She blinked. Seriously. I think you said everything you needed to at dinner. In front of your family. While I was cutting into dry chicken. Her jaw tightened. She tried to push past me. I didn't move. I didn't yell either. Just stood there, not angry, not sad. Just emptied out. I left some things, she muttered. Can I get them? I handed her a box. It had been sitting by the door since that night. Everything she hadn't taken with her. Some clothes, old perfume, her favorite coffee mug, and a book I caught her fake reading once just to impress my cousin. On top of the pile? The printed photo she kept on her nightstand. Us, on our honeymoon, her arms around my neck like she actually believed the promises we made. She didn't take the box. Just stared at it like it offended her. This is how you're handling it, she asked. I nodded. Better than being blindsided in front of your entire bloodline. That's when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it too fast. I saw the name. Avery. I froze. Not because the name meant anything to me, but because her face changed the moment it popped up. A soft, guilty curve in her mouth. The kind of look you give someone you're not supposed to be smiling about. I didn't need confirmation. I just stepped back, shut the door gently, and double-locked it. From inside, I heard her sigh, followed by a bitter whisper, you always had a flair for drama. She left. She didn't take the box. Didn't try again. But that night, something else happened. Call number 3. It wasn't from her. It was from Avery. Blocked number, but voicemail enabled. He sounded young, confident. A voice with no history behind it, no scars in it. The kind of man who thinks he's invincible because he hasn't had to build anything long enough to watch it fall apart. Hey, man, he said. Man. Like we were teammates. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I didn't know she was still with you when it started. But, well, she's with me now. And she's happy. So maybe it's time you let go, yeah? Be the bigger person. I listened to it 5 times. Then I played it again, not because I needed clarity, but because I wanted to feel the depth of the betrayal. I wanted to burn it into my memory, word for word, so I'd never forget what kind of people I was dealing with. She didn't just leave. She replaced me. Carefully. Methodically. With someone who knew she was married and still slid right in, then had the arrogance to tell me how to let go. But here's the thing. I don't let go. Not until I understand why someone thinks they can break a person and walk away clean. And as I sat in our half-empty apartment, staring at the box she refused to carry, I realized I wasn't broken. I was ready. Not for revenge. For truth. For answers. And this time, she wasn't the one in control of the narrative. I didn't sleep again that night. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I started thinking like someone who's finally realized the rules of the game were never fair to begin with. When someone burns your house down and leaves you standing in the ashes, you don't grieve the furniture. You look for the gas can. And I was tired of acting like I hadn't seen the match in her hand. I sat on the couch, staring at her untouched box of things, wondering how long she'd been planning this soft ambush. I replayed every fight we never finished, every compliment she gave with just enough sarcasm to slice beneath the surface. I remembered nights where she went to book club, but came back without remembering the book title. I remembered the perfume that appeared out of nowhere, citrus and sugar and a strange edge I'd never been able to place until I realized I was smelling someone else's attention. By morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened her old laptop. She hadn't used it in months. She'd upgraded and told me she wiped everything, but she didn't. Or maybe she meant to and just got distracted by her new life. I wasn't looking for anything specific. No expectation, no smoking gun. But I found it anyway. A folder on the desktop. Hidden, but not password protected, titled drafts. Inside were 7 Word documents. Each one was a letter. Each one dated, titled, and addressed not to me, but to herself. It took me a full hour to read all of them. Not because they were long, but because every single word was a blade I didn't see coming. She had started writing the first one nearly a year ago, long before I suspected anything. In that first letter, she wrote about how safe I was, how being with me felt like being wrapped in a blanket she couldn't breathe in. She said I never hurt her, but I also never set her on fire. She wanted more. Passion. Chaos. Something louder than love and slower than routine. She wanted someone who could make her feel reckless again. The second letter was more blunt. She mentioned Avery by name. She called him a complication she invited in and said he made her feel like she was 20 again. She compared our marriage to a museum, beautiful, silent, filled with things that used to mean something. But it was the third letter that cracked me open, because in that one, she talked about planning how to leave me. Down to the week. Down to the day. She even rehearsed what she'd say at dinner. Word. For. Word. I've already moved on emotionally. She wrote it weeks before she said it. She practiced it, tweaked it, refined the tone to sound spontaneous. I couldn't feel my hands by the time I reached the 5th letter. My body had gone cold. My jaw was clenched so tight I tasted blood. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated abandonment. She knew what it would do to me. She counted on the shock. She wrote that she hoped I wouldn't implode publicly, because the more dignified his reaction, the less guilty I'll feel. I read that line 10 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I finally did. That's when it stopped hurting. That's when I stopped trying to make sense of it. Because there was no sense. There was only her comfort. Her control. I took screenshots. All of them. Every word. Every file. Then I closed the laptop and sat there staring at the wall for hours, the taste of something metallic in my mouth that I couldn't swallow. By the time evening hit, my phone lit up again. Avery. Not a voicemail this time. A text. It read, "She's not coming back. Just let her go. You're embarrassing yourself." I stared at it, not replying. Because now I wasn't just watching my old life collapse. I was documenting it. And I was going to use her words, not mine, to show everyone exactly what had been done behind that mask of emotional growth and soul-searching. She thought she was walking into freedom, but she left a trail, and I was already following it back to the truth. The first time I saw them together, they didn't know I was watching. I hadn't planned it. Wasn't stalking. Wasn't following breadcrumbs with red yarn and thumbtacks like in the movies. No, it was pure accident, or maybe just the universe deciding I deserved to see the truth with my own eyes. No filters, no guessing, no more gaslighting myself into thinking maybe I'd exaggerated the signs. I had gone to the pharmacy to pick up something mundane, ibuprofen and cereal, I think. My appetite had finally started crawling back. I was halfway down the aisle when I saw them walk past the front windows. Her green scarf caught my eye. The one I bought her on our 3rd anniversary when we went to Maine. She said it was too soft to wear often, that it made her feel too taken care of. Now she was wearing it for him. They were laughing. He had his hand in the back pocket of her jeans, the same jeans she used to say were reserved for date nights with Gavin. He looked younger in person, sharper jawline, tall, clean. The kind of man who looked like he belonged in a travel ad, not a relationship. She paused by the magazine rack while he grabbed a drink. She pulled out her phone, snapped a quick selfie in the mirrored security panel on the ceiling, and kissed the screen before sending it. That was it. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not in a violent way. Not in a go confront them in public way. I didn't even move. I just stood between boxes of cold medicine and stared at the reflection of a woman I no longer recognized. Because that smile, that light in her eyes, it wasn't real. It wasn't hers. It was something she wore like jewelry. Something rehearsed. I could see it now, clearly, like I was finally seeing the magic trick from backstage, and the wires were showing. I left without buying anything. Drove home in silence again. No music, just the sound of my own thoughts. But this time, they weren't jumbled. They were surgical, precise. I wasn't lost anymore. I was mapping the aftermath, trying to understand not why she left, but how long she'd been building the illusion of happiness while erasing me in slow motion. That night, I reopened the screenshots of the letters. I went deeper, into her cloud backup, her notes app, her archived emails. And that's when I found something I wasn't supposed to see. A shared calendar event from 5 months ago. Rehearsal, exit dinner. Location? Her parents' house. Time, 6 p.m. Guest list. Herself. Her sister. Avery. Her therapist. The same night we had dinner with her family. I didn't understand it at first. Then I noticed the attached file. A PDF. 4 pages. Titled, De-escalation plan, Gavin. It was a script. An actual script. Step-by-step bullet points on how to present her emotional clarity in a way that would minimize confrontation, redirect guilt, and neutralize his response through group consensus. She called it group consensus. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They planned my reaction like it was a variable in an experiment. My pain wasn't just a side effect. It was an anticipated outcome, carefully prepared for, absorbed, and dismissed. Page 3 included backup phrases in case I reacted defensively. I'm sorry you feel ambushed. This isn't an attack, it's an awakening. You deserve someone who's fully present. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was theater. A production starring my wife, supported by her enablers, with me as the unwitting antagonist. By the time I reached the last page, a list of expected Gavin outcomes, my hands were shaking. It read, passive exit, delayed reaction, shame, retreat, silence. They expected me to disappear, to go quietly, to bury it, to doubt my own experience. And maybe I would have, if they hadn't left the script behind. But now the illusion was shattered. And they'd underestimated the one thing they thought I didn't have left. A voice. I wasn't supposed to see the second folder. It was buried deep, under old receipts, travel confirmations, and a dozen tax documents I doubt she even understood. But I was already in deep. Her old laptop had become a graveyard of digital footprints, and I was done being polite about where I was stepping. The folder was titled, Private, Do Not Open. She must have thought that would be enough. But curiosity is a different animal when you're not looking for evidence anymore. You're looking for understanding. Not closure. Not revenge. Just something to explain how a person can rehearse your collapse and still smile through it. Inside were 3 video files. No thumbnails. Just timestamps and initials. I played the first one. It was a therapy session. Remote. On Zoom. Her camera on. Her face calm. Her therapist, or whoever she'd hired to validate her dissent, nodding slowly like he'd heard it all before. He doesn't challenge me, she was saying. He's a shadow. Just there. Good. Kind. But dim. Like being loved by a lamp. Safe, but unchanging. The therapist didn't even flinch. They talked for 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes, I was stripped down to a list of my shortcomings, which boiled down to one theme: not being exciting enough. She didn't accuse me of abuse. She didn't say I neglected her. She said I made her feel like a retired version of herself. And somehow, that was enough for both of them to conclude I was the problem. The second video was a screen recording. A practice run. Her, reading the exact words she would later say in front of her family. Alone in a bedroom. Fixing her hair. Adjusting the angle. Repeating phrases to make them sound more natural. I've already moved on emotionally. She flinched when she said it the first time. By the 5th take, she smiled at the end. I watched it twice. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to memorize the disconnect. The gap between who she'd been and what she became. How someone who once clung to me in the dark could now perform my erasure like it was a monologue in a school play. The third file was different. No video. Just audio. A phone call. Her voice. Avery's voice. Him laughing. Her whispering. She was at work, maybe. I could hear office noise in the background. You sure he doesn't suspect anything? Avery asked. No. Gavin doesn't think like that, she replied. He's the kind of man who apologizes when you bump into him. He laughed hard at that one. And then she said something I will never forget. I think the part I'm dreading most is pretending to be sad afterward. Pretending. Not experiencing. Pretending. That word echoed in my skull for hours. It attached itself to every memory I'd ever considered authentic. That kiss under the streetlight. The time she cried at our anniversary dinner. The day we signed our lease and she said, "This is where our real life starts." Pretend. 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 I shut the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do next, but because, for the first time in weeks, I did. She wanted to control the narrative. She wanted to curate the ending. To walk away untarnished, basking in sympathy, while I disappeared quietly into the fog of emotional immaturity. But now I had everything. Her words. her plans, her own footage. And I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to send it to her parents or plaster it on the internet. No, I had something more powerful. I had truth. The one thing she never expected me to carry. Because in her mind, I was never bold enough to speak it out loud. But she forgot something vital. Silence isn't weakness. It's fuel. And now I was ready to burn what little remained, not out of spite, but because pretending had finally stopped being an option. I didn't confront her. I didn't post the recordings. I didn't send the screenshots. I didn't show up at her door with the truth printed out in color-coded bullet points. I could have. I thought about it. But the truth is, none of that would have changed who she was, or what I had become because of her. That night, after watching those files one last time, I moved everything off her old laptop onto a USB drive. Not to use, just to keep. Not for leverage, for proof. For myself. For the nights when I might question if it all really happened, if maybe I remembered it worse than it was. I wouldn't question anymore. I packed my bag, booked a cabin in the mountains 3 hours north. No Wi-Fi, no signal, just space. On the way there, I passed a bookstore in a small town. There was a note taped to the window. Locals write too. Come read us. I walked in, bought a coffee, and flipped through a spiral-bound collection of anonymous short stories. And one of them stuck with me. A single sentence near the end. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing, and just live better. I closed the book and didn't take it with me. I didn't need to. That sentence had already moved in. At the cabin, something strange happened. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was. But that feeling, too, began to fade. I remembered things I'd forgotten, like how much I used to love making breakfast, or sitting in silence with a book, without anyone calling that silence a mood. 3 days into the trip, I took a walk into town and stopped at a tiny cafe with a chalkboard menu and a crooked sign that said "Be nice or leave." A woman was sketching in the corner. She glanced up and smiled. Not the kind of smile that invited anything, just one that said, "I see you. You're still here." Her name was Callie. We didn't talk long. I didn't even tell her my full name. But she asked what I did, and for the first time in months, I didn't mention my job. I said, "I'm just figuring things out right now." And she nodded like that made perfect sense. I stayed at the cabin for a week, wrote in a notebook, cleaned my phone of her photos, blocked Avery, deleted the backup of the recordings, let it go, because truthfully, I didn't need to carry any of it anymore. When I got home, I started over, moved to a new apartment, smaller, cheaper mine, started going to the gym again, not for revenge body fantasies, just because I liked how it felt to sweat and feel sore for reasons that had nothing to do with pain. I started writing again. Short pieces. Nothing serious. But it helped. Turned the echoes into sentences. Turned the weight into chapters. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. No name. No return address. Just one sentence on a torn piece of paper. "I didn't think you'd land on your feet." I smiled. Because that's exactly why I did. Because they only win if you don't heal. And I healed. Not because I found someone new. Not because I exposed her. Not because I proved her wrong. But because I remembered who I was before her. And that man, he didn't need permission to be whole again. He just needed a reason to start.